Malaysia strongly supports establishment of humanitarian corridor in Rafah. Euro qualifier abandoned after shooting in Brussels. Salam Malaysia Madani and thank you for joining us. You're watching World Today with me, Otto Othman. Now, Malaysia strongly advocates for the immediate cessation of bombardment and the establishment of a humanitarian corridor in Rafah. In a Facebook post today, Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim said it is imperative for Israel to abandon its adherence to the politics of deposition and agree to an immediate ceasefire with Hamas and genuinely pursue a peaceful resolution to end the ongoing conflict. Datuk Seri Anwar said that he had a phone conversation with the Hamas Political Bureau head Ismail Haniyeh yesterday to express Malaysia's unwavering support for the Palestinian people. It is crucial and paramount to prioritize the well-being and safety of all individuals affected by this crisis. He added, in that spirit, the country is committed in delivering humanitarian aid, particularly in the form of food and medicine, to alleviate the sufferings of those in need. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced the launch of a humanitarian air bridge operation consisting of several flights to Egypt, aiming to bring supplies to humanitarian organizations on the ground in Gaza. She noted that the EU had decided over the weekend to triple its humanitarian assistance to over 75 million euros to support civilians in need in Gaza.
And this is why the Commission has announced to triple humanitarian aid for civilians in Gaza to 75 million euros. And we are launching an EU humanitarian air bridge to Gaza through Egypt. The first 2 flights will start this week. They will bring humanitarian goods to Gaza, and we will keep working with our partners in the region to assess and address the needs on the ground.
Diplomatic efforts to arrange a ceasefire to let aid reach the besieged Gaza Strip failed earlier, and Israel ordered the evacuation of villages in the Strip of territory near its border with Lebanon, raising fears the war could spread to a new front. Meantime, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said there were questions to be discussed about the security situation and how to prevent the conflict spreading. With Israeli-controlled crossings closed and Egypt also having shut the Rafah border in the south, Gazans are effectively trapped. Foreigners have flocked to Rafah in the hopes of being let out, after Blinken said he was confident the crossing will be open for aid into the Strip. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office dashed hopes of a deal, saying in a statement on Monday that there is currently no ceasefire and humanitarian aid in Gaza in return for removing foreigners. Hamas says the threat of an Israeli ground invasion of the blockaded Gaza Strip doesn't scare the group, and they are ready for it. The spokesman of Hamas's military wing, Abu Abedeh, in the televised statement said Azadin al-Qassam bridges were holding up 250 captives and that it is prepared to release captives with foreign nationalists as soon as the circumstances allow.
ولكننا نقدر مبدئيا أن عدد الأسرى ما بين 200 إلى 250 أسيرا أو يزيد عن ذلك، وما هو متواجد بين أيدينا في كتائب القسام نحو 200 أسير، والبقية موزعون بين مكونات أخرى.
According to Abu Obedeh, they will release the foreign prisoners when conditions are ripe. He said at least 22 hostages taken from Israel had been killed in Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. Army spokesman Daniel Hagari said earlier Monday Israel had been able to confirm and notify the relatives of 199 people held captives in Gaza. According to Hamas officials, overall, more than 2,550 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes on the narrow Palestinian enclave since 7th October. A draft resolution put forward by Russia calling for a ceasefire in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was knocked down at the United Nations UN Security Council. The resolution received 5 votes in favor, 4 votes against, and 6 abstentions. Those who voted it down were the US, the UK, France, and Japan. Russia's UN ambassador, Vasily Nebenzia, said the vote showed who are in favor of a truce or halt to discriminate bombings and the prevention of humanitarian assistance.
Вспышки насилия на Ближнем Востоке за последние десятилетия. Сегодня весь мир застыл в ожидании, что Совет Безопасности сможет предпринять решительные шаги для того, чтобы остановить кровопролитие. Но делегации западных стран поставили на этих ожиданиях крест. Считаем, что...
For his part, Palestine's ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, accused the UN Security Council of watching the attacks against 2 million people in the Gaza Strip for 10 days, stressing that people in Gaza are being killed, injured, displaced, and terrorized. Mansour said Israel has not spared a single Palestinian family in Gaza. Another resolution, which was drafted by Brazil, is set to be voted on Tuesday. Meanwhile, protesters gathered around the White House in Washington to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Equipped with signs, protesters urged U.S. President Joe Biden to listen to the Jewish community in the United States, de-escalating the conflict and restrain Israeli aggression.
Everyone here is going through unimaginable pain, and through that grief, we are determined to stop this genocide because we know the warning signs. And so we are blocking every entrance to the White House, or as many as we can stay there for, because President Biden has not been listening to the voices of American Jews and Palestinians and allies who are saying we cannot try the same thing that has not worked for decades here.
Police detained several people blocking entrances to the White House during the protests led by Jewish groups. In a related development, French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna called on both sides to respect the rights of journalists covering the conflict.
Les journalistes font partie évidemment des personnes dont nous demandons la protection, le respect de leurs droits, le respect de l'exercice de leur profession, souvent dangereuse et, comme vous l'avez évoqué, quelqu'un a dû perdre la vie tout récemment encore. Nous passons ces messages de la façon la plus ouverte lors de nos entretiens, publiquement aussi, je l'ai fait hier, je l'ai fait ce matin et je le refais très volontiers aujourd'hui. Je crois qu'il faut encore une fois que les efforts de tous convergent pour permettre à la fois l'accès de biens humanitaires à Gaza, permettre aussi aux personnes qui souhaiteraient quitter Gaza de le faire et aux personnes qui seraient à Gaza d'y vivre autant que possible en respectant leurs droits à la protection. Les journalistes en font partie.
Colonna made the remarks at a news conference 3 days after the 13th October killing of Reuters journalist Issam Abdullah and the wounding of several colleagues from Reuters, Agence France Presse and Al Jazeera. Earlier on Monday, Reuters editor-in-chief Alessandra Galloni repeated calls to the Israeli authorities for a swift, thorough and transparent investigation into the killing. Colombia yesterday demanded that Israel's ambassador leave the South American country amid a worsening spat over President Gustavo Petro's remarks on the war with Hamas. Foreign Minister Alvaro Leia said the envoy, Gali Dagan, should, quote-unquote, at a minimum apologize and leave after criticizing Petro's comparison of Israeli attacks on Gaza with the Nazi prosecution of the Jews. Petro, in one post on X, accused Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant of using language about the people of Gaza similar to what the Nazis said of the Jews. Colombia's first leftist president asserted that, quote-unquote, democratic peoples cannot allow Nazism to re-establish itself in international politics. Israeli Foreign Ministry spokesman Lior Hayat said Colombia's ambassador, Margarita Manjarrez, had been summoned over Petro's, quote-unquote, hostile and anti-Semitic statements. He accused Petro of expressing support for Hamas. In response to Hayat's statement, Petro said his country does not support genocide. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen yesterday said Washington would keep on delivering robust aid to Ukraine following EU concerns over her country's future support for Kyiv. Her promise came after the U.S. Congress dropped new funding for Ukraine from a recent bill to avert a U.S. government shutdown, a move that triggered doubts over Washington's continued commitment to support Kyiv against invading Russian forces.
We reaffirm today that our coalition will continue supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes. The U.S. and EU have each provided significant support to Ukraine. This support is bolstering the home front to help Ukrainian citizens and to enable Ukraine to channel resources toward its resistance on the front lines.
Yellen said this during a press conference with Pascal Donahue, who leads the group of finance and economy ministers in the single currency area known as the Eurogroup. The White House has estimated that a further $24 billion is needed to support Ukraine. However, the ouster of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy earlier this month by Republican hardliners raised further fears about a prolonged paralysis in Congress. 2 Swedish nationals were shot dead in Brussels late Monday by a suspect who remains at large in an attack the Belgian Prime Minister described as terrorism. The gunman fled on a scooter, and Belgium's Security Observatory raised its terror alert to level 4, or very serious, the highest for Brussels, and level 3 nationally. Belgium's Premier Alexander De Croo said the shooting had targeted Swedes, and European leaders were quick to offer their solidarity. Several Belgian media outlets said the 2 individuals killed were wearing football shirts belonging to the Swedish national team ahead of the game between Sweden and Belgium. The Group F European qualifier match between the 2 countries was suspended at half-time due to the incidents. The Belgian Crisis Center said on social media that a 3rd individual had been targeted in the attack, but said the person was not in a critical condition. Brussels is home to EU offices including the Commission, the European Council, which represents member states, and the European Parliament. Belgium, alongside France, had already been the target of an attack claimed by Daesh extremists in March 2016 at Brussels Marine Airport and on the metro system, which killed 32 people. Following the incident, Belgium's Euro 2024 qualifier against Sweden was abandoned at half-time, and fans were kept in the stadium for security reasons. Spectators at the King Baudouin Stadium in the Belgian capital were told to remain inside the ground following an announcement that players would not return for the second half. Sweden's Football Association said Belgian police had told supporters to stay in the arena for security reasons. Belgium, who had already qualified for next year's tournament, had equalized through a Romelu Lukaku penalty after Victor Gyökeres opened the scoring for Sweden before the match was halted with the score at 1-1. Belgian media reported that the Swedish players did not want to continue the game after learning of the attack. Arrive for China's Belt and Road Initiative Summit. That and more coming up after this short break.
Beli! Bos, betul lah Shopee ada pengantaran percuma.
Kenapa bayar kalau dapat penghantaran percuma di Shopee? Beli sekarang di Shopee.
Now this just in. The Election Commission EC has fixed 2nd December as polling day for the Kemaman parliamentary by-election in Terengganu. EC Chairman Tan Sri Abdul Ghani Saleh said nomination and early voting for the by-election have been fixed on 18th November and 28th November respectively. He announced this at a media conference after chairing a special EC meeting at Menara SPR in Putrajaya today to decide the important dates related to the Kemaman parliamentary by-election. Now, the by-election was necessitated after the Terengganu Election Court on 26 September nullified the victory of Che Alias Hamid of PAS in the 15th general election. Now, with regards to Beijing, China began welcoming on Monday representatives of 130 countries for a conference that will be overshadowed by the Israeli-Hamas war, as an increasingly assertive Beijing is asked to help de-escalate the violence. Now, at the top of the invitation list to China's Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, forum is Russia's President Vladimir Putin on his first trip to a major global power since the Ukraine invasion threw his regime into international isolation. Leaders have begun to pour into the Chinese capital for a gala event marking a decade of the BRI, a key project of President Xi Jinping to extend China's global reach. Several leaders are already in Beijing ahead of the two-day forum, which starts today. Among them are the Prime Ministers of Hungary, Ethiopia, and Cambodia, and the Presidents of Kenya, Chile, and Indonesia. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov flew into Beijing on Monday and within hours held talks with his Chinese counterpart. Lavrov thanked China for inviting Putin as the summit's chief guest, according to a readout from Moscow, which later said the top diplomat would head to North Korea after Beijing. Trade between China and Russia this year has soared to levels not seen since the beginning of Moscow's war in Ukraine, with Chinese imports of Russian oil offering Moscow a critical lifeline as international sanctions bite. Now, the Amazon River fell to its lowest level in over a century at the heart of the Brazilian rainforest as a record drought upends the lives of hundreds and thousands of people and damages the jungle ecosystem. Rapidly dying tributaries to the mighty Amazon have left boats stranded, cutting off food and water supplies to remote villages, while high water temperatures are suspected of killing more than 100 endangered river dolphins. The port of Manaus, the region's most populous city, at the meeting of the Rio Negro and the Amazon River, recorded 13.59 meters of water on Monday, compared to 17.60 a year ago. That is the lowest level since records began in 1902, passing a previous all-time low set in 2010. According to the Civil Defense Agency in the state of Amazonas, the drought has affected 481,000 people. Brazilian Health Minister Nícia Trindade said authorities were mobilizing health care and doctors to the affected areas. Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, is struggling to cope with a mounting waste problem, with its main dump site approaching capacity. In response, one group of volunteers, the Jakarta chapter of Switzerland-based group Trash Hero World, has started a movement to clean parks and streets in the city and raise awareness of the problem. Garbage is just part of a wider pollution crisis that has seen Jakarta top global pollution rankings multiple times in recent months, and an impending sinkage of large parts of the city due to groundwater extraction. Peruvian dog lovers celebrated the yearly Canoeing contest, in which dozens of pups in creative costumes participate in a Halloween fancy dress extravaganza. This year, the top positions were awarded to Hollywood movie costumes, including Willy Wonka from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Barbie, and Wednesday from the Addams Family. Judges considered creativity, originality, family involvement in the crafting of the costumes, and the participants' performance during the runway. Nigeria's Kano State held an all-expenses-paid mass wedding for 1,800 couples and gave customary gifts to the newlyweds. The giant ceremony, held over the weekend, was an effort to help the poor get married in a region facing a harsh economic situation. Next in sports, Zverev ousted from Japan Open. Stay with us. Now we begin our sports segment with news on tennis. The Japan Open. Number 3 seed Alexander Zverev said he played horrible after crashing out in the first round on Monday, losing to world number 60 Jordan Thompson. Now Germany's Zverev, ranked 9th in the world, lost 3-6, 4-6 in Tokyo 1 week after falling at the first hurdle at the Shanghai Masters. Zverev was returning to Japan for the first time since winning Olympic gold 2 years ago at the Tokyo Games, which were held behind closed doors because of the coronavirus pandemic. Zverev, who won the Chengdu Open in China last month, said there was nothing that he did well after having his serve broken 3 times by Thompson. Meanwhile, number 5 seed Tommy Paul and number 8 Felix Auger-Aliassime both made it through to the next round. The American Paul beat Germany's Daniel Altmaier 3-6, 6-1, 6-3, while Canada's Auger-Aliassime beat Australian Alexander Vucic 7-6, 6-7, 6-2. American Marcos Giron ousted Japanese home favorite Yoshihito Nishioka 7-6, 4-6, 6-1. Mackenzie McDonald of the United States beat Australian Max Purcell 7-5, 6-4. And Austrian Sebastian Offner saw off Christopher O'Connell of Australia 6-7, 7-6, 7-5. In soccer, England head coach Gareth Southgate defended his decision to continue selecting Jordan Henderson after the 33-year-old midfielder was booed off the pitch at Wembley during England's 1-0 friendly victory over Australia. Speaking ahead of today's European qualifier at home to Italy, Southgate said his team selection is not based on popularity contest. While fans may disagree with Henderson's decision to move to the Saudi Pro League last summer, the England coach said it was not a reason to boo him.
We're a stronger team if the supporters are with us and wholeheartedly supporting the team. That's the connection we've had over a long period of time now. We'll assess Jordan like every other player, but if I just select on popularity contest, then our team would look very, very different.
The former Liverpool captain was subject to raucous boos from the home crowd last Friday when he was subbed off in the 62nd minute in his first appearance on home soil since signing a £700,000 per week contract for Al Ettifaq in July to become the highest paid English footballer of all time. With the Azzurri returning to Wembley for the first time since their Euro 2020 triumph over England, the 3 Lions need only a point to ensure qualification for the finals in Germany next summer. Meanwhile, Italy coach Luciano Spalletti has described how his side were left distraught by the betting scandal which has rocked Italian football in recent days. Now, Spalletti described the upset in the team dressing room ahead of the European qualifier, away to Group C leaders England, where the visitors will be without Sandro Tonali and Nicolo Zaniolo. The midfield duo left Azzurri's headquarters on Thursday after being told they were involved in an investigation by prosecutors.
Il fatto che ci sia poi successo questa disavventura che tutti abbiamo un po' subito, che ha colpito qualche giovane del nostro calcio, è una cosa che ci dispiace, una cosa che ci fa male. Erano dei calciatori forti.
The Italian Soccer Federation did not specify what the investigation was about, but said the 2 midfielders were allowed to go home as the federation believed they were not in the right state of mind to face the upcoming matches. Turin prosecutors said on Wednesday they were investigating another Italian footballer, Nicolo Fagioli, for alleged illegal betting activities. Now, expectations are building on the All Blacks after their sensational victory over world number 1 ranked Ireland in the Rugby World Cup quarterfinals on Saturday. And the 3 times champions would have it no other way.
Yeah, I just feel really privileged to be here. I think, you're just constantly giving and trying to be better yourself. The expectations are extremely high, but you wouldn't want it anywhere else, really. That's what the jersey's about, and that's what it demands of us every week. And you can't sugarcoat anything, and you just...
Argentina waits in the semi-final, and most observers consider the Pumas a long shot to reach their first final. The All Blacks, though, are taking nothing for granted, mindful that Argentina beat them in New Zealand for the first time in a rugby championship class last year in Christchurch. International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach said on Monday a call for him to stay on past the end of his second term would be discussed internally and refused to rule out remaining in place past 2025. Several IOC members on Sunday during their session in the Indian financial capital called on Bach to stay on despite a limit of 2 terms. Elected in 2013, Bach is due to step down in 2025 in line with the current Olympic Charter rules, following a first 8-year term and a second 4-year one.
The situation was as follows, that I had heard some rumors before, and that some members wanted and want me to continue my mandate, but I did clearly not expect that this would come to the session, that it would be brought up in the session.
Since taking over, Bach has had to tackle a number of major crises, such as the Russian doping scandal following the 2014 Winter Games in Sochi. He also had to coordinate postponement of the Tokyo 2020 Olympics by a year due to the COVID-19, as well as the fallout on world sport from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Squash will be featured as one of the 5 new sports at the 2028 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. A vote of the International Olympic Committee's session in Mumbai approved squash together with baseball, softball, flag football, cricket and lacrosse. The IOC's executive board last week accepted a proposal by LA organizers for 22 cricket, the sport's shortest format, to be included along with the 4 other new events. But the IOC said Monday the status of boxing at the 2028 Games remains, quote-unquote, on hold after it stripped the International Boxing Association, IBA, of its recognition, following a dispute over how the sport is governed. Boxing has been part of every Olympic since 1920 and will feature at next year's Paris Games. But in June, the IBA was effectively expelled from the Olympic movement, following a bitter dispute between Games chiefs and its Russian president, Umar Kremlev. That move came following concerns over the credibility of IBA-sanctioned tournaments, as well as the boxing governing body's finances and governance. Well, that ends Bulletin today. A reminder of our top story. Malaysia strongly supports establishment of humanitarian corridor in Rafah. Now tune in to Malaysia Tonight coming up at 8:30 p.m. on TV1 and saluran Berita RTM. I'm Otto Othman. Malaysia Madani, tekad perpaduan, penuhi harapan.